I wasn't supposed to see that message. One text was all it took to destroy my marriage, expose my family, and uncover the biggest scam our town had ever seen. The strangest part? My own mother, my brother, and almost everyone I trusted already knew the truth, and they chose his side instead of mine. They thought a rich man could never lose. They had no idea who he really was. But before we start today's story, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. My name is Ethan Carter, and I am 36 years old. Until 3 years ago, I thought I had a simple but happy life. I owned a small auto repair shop in Millfield, a quiet town where everybody knew everybody. I wasn't rich, but I worked hard, paid my bills, and slept peacefully at night. My wife, Rachel Carter, was 34 years old. We had been married for 8 years. At least I thought we were happy. Looking back now, the warning signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. It started when Rachel became obsessed with money. Every conversation somehow turned into what we didn't have. One evening we were eating dinner when she suddenly put down her fork. Jessica and Mark bought a lake house. I nodded. Good for them, she sighed.
That's all you have to say? What else am I supposed to say?
I don't know, Ethan. Maybe that you want more out of life. I stared at her. I do want more. That's why I work 6 days a week. She rolled her eyes. Working harder isn't the same as becoming successful. That comment bothered me more than I admitted. Because no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed enough anymore. A few months later, a man named Daniel Brooks moved into town. Nobody knew much about him, but everybody knew he had money. A lot of money. He bought the largest house in the county. He drove expensive sports cars. He wore designer clothes. And within weeks, he became the most talked about person in Millfield. At first, I didn't care. Rich people came and went. But Rachel cared. A lot. She started mentioning him constantly. Did you hear Daniel owns several investment companies? Did you know Daniel travels all over the world? Daniel made more money in 1 year than most people make in 10. At first, I laughed it off. Then it became annoying. Then it became concerning. One night I finally asked her,
Why are you always talking about him?
She looked at me for a moment. Then she shrugged. I guess I just admire successful people. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. A week later, I walked into my mother's house for Sunday dinner. The moment I entered, I heard Daniel's name. Again. My brother Tyler was talking excitedly. Daniel says he's opening new investment opportunities. My Uncle Steve nodded. I already put $20,000 in. My mother smiled. Best financial decision I've ever made. I sat down slowly. You all invested money with a guy you've known for a few months? They looked at me like I was crazy. Tyler laughed. Not everyone is scared of success, Ethan. That irritated me. I didn't say that. I'm saying maybe you should be careful. My mother frowned. You're just jealous because people are doing better than you. The room fell silent. Even Rachel didn't defend me. She just looked down at her plate. That hurt more than I expected. Over the next few months, things got worse. Rachel started spending less time at home. There was always an excuse. A work event, a dinner, shopping, coffee with friends. At first, I trusted her completely. Then little things stopped making sense. She started hiding her phone, taking calls in other rooms, smiling at messages she wouldn't show me. One night, I woke up at 2 in the morning and noticed she wasn't beside me. I walked downstairs. She was sitting in the kitchen, texting someone. The moment she saw me, she locked her phone. Too quickly, way too quickly. Who are you talking to? I asked. She immediately stood up. Nobody. The most suspicious answer in the history of suspicious answers. But I didn't push it. Part of me was afraid of what I'd discover. Then came the day everything changed. I was at home on a Tuesday afternoon. Rachel had gone shopping. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. A message appeared on the screen. Normally, I never touched her phone. Never. But the preview caught my attention. Can't stop thinking about last night. Miss you already. My heart stopped. The sender's name was Daniel. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Maybe another message arrived. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. My hand started shaking. I picked up the phone. My brain was screaming at me not to look, but my heart already knew the truth. I unlocked the screen. Rachel had never changed the password. What I found destroyed me. Hundreds of messages, photos, voice notes, plans, conversations stretching back almost 7 months. 7 months. While I was working overtime to support our future, she had been building a new future with someone else. I felt physically sick. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was the way they talked about me. Daniel called me pathetic. Rachel laughed. Daniel called me a loser. Rachel agreed. At one point she wrote, "The only thing Ethan has is a good heart. Unfortunately, good hearts don't pay for luxury vacations." I read that sentence 5 times. Every word felt like a knife. I sat there for nearly an hour, completely numb. Then I noticed something else. Messages mentioning my family. My mother, my brother, my uncle. They all knew, every single one of them. There were conversations about family dinners, private jokes, plans, even discussions about when Rachel would finally leave me. The people I trusted most had been helping hide the affair. For months. I thought betrayal had a limit. I was wrong. That evening, Rachel came home. I was sitting in the living room waiting. The phone was on the table. The moment she saw it, her face turned white. She knew. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly asked, "You looked through my phone?" I laughed, actually laughed, because somehow that was her first concern.
You cheated on me.
She crossed her arms. It's not that simple. Every cheating person's history seems to say those exact words. Really? I asked. Then explain it. She looked away. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it happened. She remained silent. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. How long? 7 months. The honesty somehow hurt more. I nodded slowly. And my family? She didn't answer. That answer told me everything. I stood up. Get out. Her eyes widened.
What? Get out of my house. Ethan? Now.
For the first time since I'd met her, she looked scared. But she left. The next morning, I called my mother. I wanted answers. Instead, I got another betrayal. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny anything. She simply said, "Rachel deserves someone who can give her the life she wants." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're defending this? Ethan, Daniel is successful. Rachel made her choice. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Over the next few days, the entire town seemed to turn against me. Rumors spread everywhere. People looked at me differently. Some even treated me like I was the problem. Then something strange happened. A former customer named Frank Wilson came into my repair shop. Frank was usually cheerful. That day, he looked terrified. He closed the office door behind him. Then he lowered his voice. "Ethan, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" Frank glanced around nervously. "Do you know Daniel Brooks personally?" I shook my head. "Why?" Frank swallowed hard. Then he said something that immediately got my attention. "Because I think something is very wrong with that man." I sat forward.
What do you mean?
Frank reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder. And when I saw what was inside, I realized my marriage was only the beginning of the nightmare. Part 2, I stared at the folder in Frank Wilson's hands. My marriage had already fallen apart. My family had already betrayed me. At that point, I thought nothing could shock me anymore. I was wrong. Frank placed the folder on my desk and slowly opened it. Inside were bank statements, investment documents, contracts, and dozens of printed emails. "What exactly am I looking at?" I asked. Frank rubbed his forehead. "I invested nearly $200,000 with Daniel." My eyes widened. That was almost everything Frank owned.
2 months ago, I tried withdrawing some of my money, and he kept giving excuses. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What kind of excuses? Paperwork delays, account transfers.
International regulations. Every week it was something new. Frank pointed at several documents. I started checking everything myself. I flipped through the pages. The more I read, the worse it became. Many of Daniel's companies didn't seem to exist. Several business addresses led to empty buildings. Some investment records contained obvious inconsistencies. Nothing made sense. Frank looked directly at me. "I think Daniel is running a scam." The words hung in the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I remembered something. My mother, my brother Tyler, my uncle Steve, half the town. They had all invested money with Daniel. If Frank was right, this wasn't going to end badly. It was going to end catastrophically. Over the next week, Frank and I quietly started digging deeper. The more information we found, the more dangerous the situation appeared. Daniel wasn't just taking money from wealthy investors. Teachers, retirees, small business owners, even young couples saving for their first homes had trusted him. Everyone believed they were making incredible returns. But there was one huge problem. Nobody had actually seen real proof. They only saw numbers on statements Daniel provided, numbers anyone could print. One evening, Frank called me. His voice sounded panicked. "Ethan, you need to come over right now." I drove straight to his house. When I arrived, several documents were spread across his dining table. Frank pointed at a photograph. "Look at this." The picture showed Daniel standing beside a luxury office building. I frowned. "So? That building isn't his." "What?" Frank handed me another document. The actual owner confirmed Daniel rented a small office there for only 3 months. I felt my pulse quicken. Everything about Daniel's image was built on lies. The mansion, the businesses, the investments, the success. It was all smoke and mirrors. But we still needed proof. Real proof. Then fate handed us exactly what we needed. 3 days later, Rachel showed up at my repair shop. I hadn't seen her since I kicked her out. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. For the first time in months, she didn't look confident. She looked frightened. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. She swallowed. "We need to talk."
Almost laughed. Now you want to talk? Ethan, please. Against my better judgment, I listened. Rachel sat across from me.
For several seconds, she couldn't even meet my eyes. Finally, she spoke. Daniel isn't who he says he is. I stared at her. You don't say. Her eyes filled with tears.
No, you don't understand. Then explain it.
She took a deep breath.
I found things. What things?
She hesitated. Then she pulled out her phone. Photographs, screenshots, bank transfers, fake contracts, secret messages. My heart started racing. Rachel had discovered evidence. A lot of evidence. Apparently, Daniel trusted her enough to let his guard down. Too much. She had accidentally seen messages revealing that investor money wasn't being invested at all. New deposits were simply being used to pay earlier investors. A classic scam. A massive one. The kind that eventually collapses. I looked at her. Why are you showing me this? Rachel started crying. Because I finally realized who he really is. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Anger, satisfaction, pity, maybe all three. Then she said something unexpected. He never loved me. I remained silent. She wiped her eyes. I was just another trophy. The irony was impossible to ignore. She had traded loyalty for money, and the money turned out to be fake. A week later, everything exploded. The first sign came when Daniel's office suddenly closed. Then his phone stopped working. Then people started demanding withdrawals. Nobody received their money. Panic spread through Millfield like wildfire. Within 48 hours, the entire town was in chaos. People were lining up outside Daniel's property. The gates were locked. The house was empty. He had disappeared, and he hadn't left alone. Millions of dollars had vanished with him. Retirement funds, college savings, business investments, life savings, gone. The news spread across the state. Soon reporters arrived, investigators arrived, federal authorities arrived. And that's when the full truth finally emerged. Daniel Brooks wasn't even his real name. He had committed similar scams in other places before moving to Millfield. Each time he created a new identity, a new success story, a new group of victims. Then he disappeared before everything collapsed. This time, however, something different happened. Thanks to the documents Frank found and the evidence Rachel provided, investigators had a trail. For weeks, the search continued. Then one morning I received a call. Daniel had been arrested while attempting to leave the country. The authorities recovered part of the stolen money. Not all of it, but enough to help many victims. The entire town celebrated, except my family, because they had lost almost everything. My uncle Steve lost his retirement savings. My brother Tyler lost the money he'd borrowed to invest. My mother lost nearly every dollar she had set aside for the future. The same people who mocked me for being average now faced financial ruin. A few months later, my mother came to see me. She looked older, smaller somehow. Life had humbled her. For several moments, she simply stood there. Then she said something I never expected. I was wrong. I stayed silent. Tears formed in her eyes. We all were. Years earlier, hearing those words would have meant everything. Now they simply felt late, very late. I chose money over my own son, she whispered. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I nodded. I know. My relationship with my family eventually improved, but it was never the same. Some wounds heal, others become scars. As for Rachel, she spent months trying to rebuild her life. One day she asked if we could try again. I told her no. Not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because trust is like glass. Once shattered, it never returns to its original form. A year later, I sold my repair shop and opened a larger automotive business in a neighboring city. The business grew steadily. Not overnight, not through shortcuts, not through scams, through honest work. The same thing people once laughed at me for. Ironically, I became more successful than I had ever been. Not because I chased money, but because I focused on building something real. Today, when I look back on everything that happened, I realize Daniel Brooks didn't destroy my life. He revealed the truth. He revealed who truly cared about me, who valued character over wealth, and who would abandon their principles the moment money appeared. If there's one lesson I learned from all of this, it's this. Never envy people simply because they look successful. Some fortunes are built on lies, and some of the richest-looking people are actually the poorest in character. In the end, money can attract attention, but honesty, loyalty, and integrity are what truly determine a person's worth. And when the illusion finally falls apart, character is the only thing that remains. The people who betrayed me chased wealth and lost everything. I lost them, and found a better future instead.